then we'll get
Will
into
do.
learning about safe transportation and other things with Michael Garner.
How's it going? How are you?
I'm good. How are you? So you were running late. What happened?
Yeah, I was on a congressional panel discussion about diversity that was sponsored by the Black Caucus in Washington D.C. and there were about 400 minority and women-owned firms on the call. This panel discussion, it was a Zoom call, and so I'm sorry I'm late. It started at 3:00, and
All right.
so
Do you have time to go a little over? Is that okay? Do you have time?
Definitely.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right. So you didn't see Princess Lockaroo perform, but I don't know, you were telling me before that you knew about Soul Train intimately, right?
Of course. I mean, every black person in America know about Soul Train. So Soul Train actually started in Chicago, probably the late 1960s, by Don Cornelius, who was a journalist. He basically got a sponsor. The sponsor was Sears, and he created a daily show, and it came on a UHF station, Station 17 in Chicago. And so he would highlight the latest dances, the latest artists on every day. And so you would run home from school and turn on Soul Train every day. And so when Berry Gordy...
Unlike broadcast television, right? I mean,
Yes.
That's all that existed then.
Yes. So, I mean, back in those days, you had your standard stations, 2, 4, 7, 9, 11, and then a PBS 13, right? But in Chicago, a new concept came out, UVH or something, where there were new channels coming out. And so it was on Channel 17 in Chicago. And so when Berry Gordy moved Motown from Detroit to Los Angeles, Don moved Soul Train from Chicago to LA to give an outlet to the record companies that wanted to expose new artists and new songs. And so Soul Train became a weekly show on Saturday afternoons. And so starting from Chicago, he followed Berry Gordy out, and the rest is history. He would call it the hippest train ride in America, and he would always end his shows with love, peace, and soul.
Huh. And why do you think it was so successful? Because, you know, the world wasn't, well, we could talk about that in terms of diversity and inclusion, which is our next topic. Why do you think people embraced the Black community so much during the 70s in terms of watching it?
Well, it was coming out of the Civil Rights Movement and the Black Power movement. And so corporate America migrated over to being sponsors of Black shows, and they had sponsors. And then, I mean, everybody has always liked Black music dating back to the 1930s and 40s. And right. So when R&B really hit in the 1960s, then basically Soul Train gave a platform to move Black music into Middle America and in the homes of everyone. And so Soul Train was very revolutionary because it was owned by Blacks. Gotcha. And so Don owned the trademark. He owned everything. He employed a lot of Black people behind the scenes. There were a lot of Black companies who were advertising their products on Soul Train. And so it was a win-win for the Black community.
Wow. Okay. Well, yeah, it's crazy where we are today. So we are obviously in pretty devastating times, and thankfully we have people like you. And you're the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer of the MTA, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. I'm really glad you had that up there because I actually didn't know what the acronym meant. And you're working on creating a culture of diversity and inclusion. So I want to start there. And then, of course, I know everybody's so interested on how they should feel about taking the subway or public transportation around the world. Anybody, well, you're not doing it around the world, but everybody is. And I would love to hear the story of how you got to where you are today and how we should feel about using public transportation moving forward. Well, let's start there, actually. So tell us the story of where we are right now with the subway. I hear that it closes at 1 a.m. right now. And
Yes.
and what's happening? How should we feel? Those of us who live in Brooklyn and have to get into Manhattan, what should we
You
do?
should feel safe because the MTA, for the first time in history, we're shutting down 24-hour service from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. and we're disinfecting all of the subway cars and the subway stations in itself. And so if you ride the subways now, you will see a big difference. One, the ridership is still down, but we are disinfecting all of our subway trains on a daily basis. And
Hmm.
so these trains are clean, they're safe, they've been disinfected, and it is a law to wear your mask. And so if someone is caught without wearing their mask, they can be written up and given a summons for $50 fine for not wearing their mask. And so
50, 50, 50, or yeah, okay.
50.
And who's observing that right now? How
NYPD, and also MTAPD. And so
MTA?
they are trolling the subway systems and the train to make sure that our customers are adhering to social distancing, but also wear their mask. It is mandatory for you to wear your mask if you're riding our buses and our subways. Mandatory. No ifs, ands, and buts.
And what about social distancing? Is everybody 6 feet apart on the train?
Most,
Okay. What's
most.
going to happen when, I guess right now, I think it was 10% of people going back to work in New York City in the buildings who were working from home before. There are a lot of people who were not able to work from home. I think like yourself, right? Were you working from home?
Yes,
Yeah.
we were mandated to work from home by the governor, and so our first day back was on July 6th. So 30% of the MTA staff is currently back working in their respective offices. The other staff are working remotely.
Hmm. Okay. So, yeah, what about when everything opens up? How are we going to social distance or physically distance on the train?
Well, in stages, and
Okay.
so a funny thing is that we live in an economy where um, our economy is not going to thrive if you are at home. It takes you to get back out to spend your monies so it can drive the economy. And so everyone is at a pause moment right now to try to figure out whether or not it's going to be a spike in the fall in conjunction with flu season. And so everyone is kind of in a pause mode right now. But as soon as there's a vaccine, as soon as it's safe for the public to get back into their respective offices, that's what's going to drive the economy. I mean, we live in a city that the second industry driver is tourism. And so I was reading where last year we experienced 60 million tourists, 60 million tourists,
Wow.
and they spent $50 billion. So tourism is one of the leading drivers of the economy in New York City. And you know that as New York City goes, the nation goes. And so if we're not thriving, if we're not prosperous, if Broadway is shut down, if the taxis are not being employed, if hotels are not open, if restaurants are closed and bars are closed, we are in a pandemic economically.
And do you think that's going to happen or you have no idea?
I have no idea, but I will say this, that all of the economists are predicting that we have not even experienced the fallout from COVID-19 yet. They are predicting that it's really going to be a fall in the first and second quarters of next year. And
And
so,
how? Yep. You-
and so we need to figure out a way of how we can get our economy back on track. How can we can operate under the new normal, whatever the new normal is and whatever the new normal is going to be. But New York City is the kind of city that we have to thrive. We have to get out. We have to engage in a great nightlife. We have to get out to our restaurants and our bars,
Mm-hmm.
and spend capital in order to drive the economy.
And so if you know this, which we trust you because you're basically a governmental official. By the way, who runs the MTA? Just for those of you those of us who don't really know, like me.
It's ran by a chairman and CEO, Pat Foy, and a board. And the board members are appointed by the governor, the respective county executives in each one of the counties that we service, and the mayor also appoints board members as well. And so the MTA, from a data point perspective, we are a $1 trillion organization with our real estate holdings and our equipment. And we employ 72,000 people. Our service area is 5,000 square miles from Suffolk, Long Island, all the way up to Newburgh, New York. And we safely transport our customers 6.2 million per day pre-COVID to their respective jobs and other places that they are traveling to.
Well, this is a good segue into what your job is, in addition to being part of making sure all the transportation arenas that you're overseeing, which are what? You have subways, buses.
Well, we have buses, subways, commuter rail, including Long Island Railroad and Metro North, and bridges and tunnels.
And before we go to diversity and inclusion, which is what you do in particular this organization, how can all of us who don't live in New York, what can we learn from you and your organization, obviously, and the journey from March to where we are now, and what we have to do to move forward to make sure everybody's safe?
Well, once again, we're the largest transportation network in North America. You need to adhere to our safety protocols. When you ride our system, adhere to social distancing. Make sure that you wear your mask at all times so we can drive this COVID pandemic downward. Mm-hmm. The governor has done a fantastic job. I was getting phone calls from all over the country from family and friends who said that they would rather watch Governor Cuomo give his observation on COVID-19 and how to effectively deal with it than listening to Donald Trump.
Well, I mean, that's not surprising. But and one last question, how do you feel about a lot of the people who have a lot of the New Yorkers who have left New York City? Has that impacted not only transportation, but what is the conversation there? Or maybe you're not having it about people. Yeah.
I'm hearing a lot of people who are moving out to the rural areas and suburban areas because they did not have a good experience with being locked up in their apartments during the mandatory quarantine and shutdown. But listen, New York is the greatest city in the world, the greatest, most diverse city in the world, where fashion and dance and food and trends are set here. So as New York City goes, the nation goes. And so I don't care if it's the bombing of the World Trade Center in 92, 93, 9/11 in 2001. We will get through this pandemic because New Yorkers are strong.
Yeah, I agree with that. And we have been doing a great job to contain it. And again, we'll see what happens in the fall. So shifting to the diversity and inclusion conversation, you are the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer of the MTA, right? And how long have you had that job?
I am the first and only Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the MTA. I was appointed back in 2009.
And it's interesting it's interesting because right now it is like, I don't want to say trendy because it should be part of every organization, but you probably had this title before anybody in any corporation, because I didn't hear that title 12 years ago in the companies that I worked in. Is that correct? Or
I was one of the first, not the first, because the private sector had that title prior to me ascertaining that title. So there were a few of us. Now is more globally accepted and used. So most of your major corporations now have a chief diversity and inclusion officer, and your government agencies, from the city agencies, state agencies, and state authorities, they have hired diversity and inclusion officers as well.
And what does that mean for what you do and in the context of the MTA?
And that means that my staff and we're currently going through a transformation. So I'm adding staff as we currently speak. So my staff of 90 people are in charge of the EEO and Title VI rules and regulations and laws, making sure that every employee at the MTA has the ability to work in a harassment-free environment. And so I have dedicated investigators. So if you lodge a complaint about race discrimination, gender discrimination, or sexual harassment, I have staff who will investigate it and then make a recommendation on the tenure of the employee who is accused. That segment of my staff, they have the ability to work in conjunction with our HR departments in making sure that we have set strategies in place that allows the MTA to recruit, hire, develop, and promote a diverse workforce. So our workforce should reflect the 12-county region, 5,000-mile region that we service. It should reflect that marketplace. My other staff, they are responsible with the recruitment, engagement, and integration of certified minority and women-owned and disadvantaged business enterprises into our buying and procurement process. And so last year, the MTA made history. We paid in excess of $1.1 billion to minority and women-owned firms in 1 year. And so the reason why that's really important is because when you look at, historically speaking, a lot of your minority and women-owned firms have been simply shut out of the marketplace. And so now having the ability to eradicate barriers to entry and to pay in excess of $1 billion to minority women-owned firms in 1 year, you're giving them the opportunity to become homeowners, to migrate to the middle class, to have better educational opportunities and better healthcare options. And it's part of the American dream. And guess what? It's being done with taxpayers' dollars. And so everyone now has the ability to benefit from taxpayer-driven dollars and not the select few.
And how has this mission evolved from 12 years ago? What was the sequence of events in terms of culturally, in terms of your mission to create what you've created up to this point?
Out of 97 state agencies and public authorities, the MTA was ranked last with dollars paid to minority women-owned firms. So for example, the year before I got here, that metric or that number was $116 million that were paid, which equated to 6% of MWBE inclusion. Last year, previously 2 years ago, because our most recent years, the numbers are still being vetted. But 2 years ago, that 116 million increased to 736 million and 27% MWBE inclusion. And so we've made great strides of, once again, the recruitment, development, engagement of certified minority and women-owned business enterprises.
Mm-hmm. And how has the death of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement impacting the role that you have? Has it changed anything? How has it impacted in terms of what you've been doing and what you want to do and what you will do?
Well, I mean, the death of George Floyd, and I can speak from a personal perspective because I'm part of the Eric Garner family. Eric Garner was my cousin. And essentially,
Wow.
it took the family and I led by his mother, who is the strongest person I know, 6 years in order to gain justice, and having that officer fired and losing his pension. 6 years. And so after the firing of that officer, the mother, Gwen Carr, once again, we just celebrated her birthday in Brooklyn last night. She had the ability to legislatively move a bill in two houses, the state Senate and the state Assembly, the Eric Garner anti-chokehold bill, which was just signed into law by Governor Andrew Cuomo. And so it is unlawful for any law enforcement officer to put anyone in a chokehold because of this law that was just signed into law by the governor. So I can speak from a personal perspective, but I can also speak from what I do in my day career of ensuring that everyone has the opportunity to be included in our processes in order to be engaged in minority women-owned firms. So your question is, how has the movement motivated or created effective change? And it has, because not only are we now focusing on the contracts, we're focusing on our workforce to make sure that qualified, diverse candidates have the opportunity not only to apply, but to obtain careers at the MTA. And once they obtain a career, have the ability to flourish and be promoted like any other group of people. And so the George Floyd issue, we are in an era right now, which I mentioned before, that I akin to 1968. So in 1968, you had the assassination of the Dr. Martin Luther King. You had the assassination of Bobby Kennedy. You had a Vietnam War going on, and you had civil unrest in most of your big major cities in this nation. And now we are mired in a health pandemic. We are mired in a recession for the country. But when the country is in a recession, Black America, Latinx America, Asian America are in a depression. And then we're now mired in not only national civil rights protests and unrest, but international civil rights protests and unrest. And so we need like-minded people are going to come together, because what I see with these protests and marches, I see Black, I see white, I see Asian, I see young, and I see old. That's the true America that I live in. And when you talk about buzzwords like we want our country back or make America great again, those are buzzwords to take us back to where we was when there was wholesale discrimination, there was lynching, there were voter suppression, slavery. This country is nothing more than an experiment. We are an experiment of a collection of states, blue states, red states, purple states, urban, rural, Black, white, Latinx. We went through a civil war where more than 700,000 people lost their lives in this nation. The civil rights movement started when, after slavery, there was a short period of time of prosperity. And then beginning in the early 1900s, when the federal troops were removed from the South, there were years and years and years and years and years of protests in the civil rights movement. And so hopefully, during this time period that we live in right now, like-minded people are going to come together and create a nation that's going to be open for all and not have someone pit one group against the other group.
Yeah, it's pretty profound. And do you have hope that we're going to get out of this culture of disparity?
Well, hey, listen, you know what? Speaking from the Black experience of being here since 1619, Black people in this country have always had hope. And so, yes, I have hope that as we move forward, this country is going to become the country that it should be for every American that's in this country. But we got to work at it, and we got to fight. We got to stamp out discrimination in whatever form it services in this country.
And as the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the MTA, what would your advice be to all the other leaders of every organization here in America?
To drive effective change. I was recently on a talk show, on an Israeli news show, and they asked me the same question. Why was I so optimistic that we were finally going to see change in America? And I told them that once we start talking to each other and not at each other, and understand that we all have the same commonalities, we will then recognize and realize that we are one.
Beautiful. Okay, well, thank you for being here. We are going to do everything you say. I'm speaking for myself, but I know this community here is like-minded. And I know you're really busy and you probably have to go back. So I'm grateful that you took the time to do this and be here. And I hope we can stay in touch.
Definitely.
All right.
Definitely. And thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and having me on your very dynamic and informative show. And please continue to bring the news and bring the trends to your listenership.
I hope we can continue to do that. And I'll do everything in my power. I love doing what I do. And I know I do things in interesting ways. And my mission in life is to share it and hopefully inspire everybody to reinvent the future to what we want it to be.
Great.
So thanks, Michael.
All right, have a great day.
You too. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So, Sam, I'd love to just say my closing statements to everybody. And I just, first of all, Sam, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Like I just said to Michael, I love what I do. I hope you continue to join me on my other offerings, my premium culture class, which you're all welcome to join. You could go to my website, psychi.com. And if you're part of an organization and you think that I could provide inspiration and value, please ask me to come on and help everybody. And thank you. I used to do this weekly. Now that I did 22 of them, I just no longer can do it on a weekly basis, but I will be offering these special ones every so often. So keep looking at your emails every week. I'm always going to tell you what I learned. I'm also spending more time on social media at Zeitguide Brad on Instagram and Twitter. And I obviously have LinkedIn. So help me create this community of making the world a better place. And we have a lot of work to do in the next few weeks. So hopefully when we next meet, we'll all have much more positivity. So thank you. I love you all. Bye.